I don't mean to frighten you, but the world is full of both good and bad people. Sometimes those bad people do bad things to you, or worse, to those you love. When it happens to those you love, we have an immediate and unstoppable desire for retribution. It's a natural reaction, but it can be very dangerous if you let it take over your life. Vengeance always has consequences, both for the person seeking revenge and for those involved in the situation. Seeking vengeance often leads to a cycle of escalating conflict. When one person seeks revenge, it could provoke the other party to retaliate in response. This can create a never-ending cycle of revenge, causing further harm and damage. Seeking revenge often involves dehumanizing the other person, reducing them to the source of one's pain and suffering. This can erode an individual's empathy and compassion, making it difficult to form meaningful connections and maintain healthy relationships in the future. Focusing on revenge means your life gets put on hold. It can distract you from personal growth, self-improvement, and pursuing positive personal goals. And ultimately, this can lead to a sense of stagnation and regret when one realizes that revenge didn't bring the expected satisfaction or feeling of resolution. Let me tell you a story about one case of a man who was almost consumed by his quest for revenge. His name was Colonel Douglas Mortimer. He was a man of distinction, renowned for his sharp intellect and later in his life, a relentless pursuit of justice. Born and raised in the heart of the Carolinas, Mortimer later served in the Civil War. He had seen the worst of humanity and grew his skills with firearms and with violence. Mortimer was a man of few words, but possessed a commanding presence and an air of authority that demanded respect. Mortimer's military background instilled in him a disciplined and tactical approach to his work, making him a formidable adversary for any criminal he pursued. I talk about Mortimer like there's two halves of his life. Mortimer's life changed one night when his sister was assaulted and killed in a fit of jealous rage by the notorious criminal El Indio. From that moment on, Mortimer was driven by a personal vendetta against the ruthless and sadistic outlaw. Seeking justice and revenge, Mortimer pursued El Indio with unwavering determination. Mortimer became a calculated and methodical bounty hunter and killer. He had a menacing presence, keeping a darkness and hatred just below the surface. He had exceptional marksmanship skills. Mortimer's precise shooting abilities and sharp intellect made him a deadly opponent in gunfights. He spent the second half of his life pursuing El Indio, traveling from town to town, collecting bounties with his blend of skill and violence. Mortimer finally caught up to El Indio, who had, over the years, become a powerful crime lord with a formidable gang of outlaws. Mortimer's lust for vengeance could have consumed him, and it nearly did. He could have tried to take on El Indio and his entire gang, but he would have surely been killed in the attempt, even if he was ultimately successful in killing El Indio. Was it worth it? Was revenge worth throwing away everything? Thankfully, and despite his relentless pursuit of El Indio, Mortimer was saved by his intellect and his moral code. He established a professional relationship with another bounty hunter, Manco, also known as the Man with No Name, who himself is also pursuing El Indio, but for financial reasons. El Indio's capture or death was worth a lot of money, a life-changing amount of money. Although initially at odds, the two form an unlikely alliance, combining their skills to bring down El Indio and his gang. This is part 2 of Sergio Leone's Man with No Name Trilogy, 1965's For a Few Dollars More.
Didn't hear what the bet was.
Your life.
It's true, Manco and Mortimer started as rivals. Why split the money when working alone, you could keep all of it for yourself? What they both realized was that no one man was going to be able to take out El Indio and his gang. So after a few attempts to drive the other one off, the two bounty hunters decided to work together despite their differences. This uneasy and sometimes dysfunctional partnership fits into an Old West tradition of unlikely allies. Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Wyatt Earp was a lawman and a gambler. Doc Holliday was a dentist turned gambler and gunslinger. Both of them will be remembered forever for their involvement in the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Butch Cassidy, whose real name was Robert Leroy Parker, and the Sundance Kid, whose real name was Harry Alonzo Longabarba, are still remembered as notorious outlaws and bank robbers. And according to legend, the two started off as rivals and hated each other. Calamity Jane and Wild Bill Hickok. Calamity Jane, also known as Martha Jane Canary, was a frontier woman known for her adventurous spirit and marksmanship. Wild Bill Hickok, whose real name was James Butler Hickok, was a legendary lawman and gunslinger. And although they didn't initially hit it off, they often crossed paths and are associated with each other forever in Old West lore. These are just a few examples of famous duos from the Old West. There were many other notable figures and partnerships during that time, each with their own stories and adventures. For Monco and Mortimer, they had to partner up if they wanted to survive and bring El Indio down. El Indio and his gang, known for their brutal and merciless ways, had become the most feared criminals in the region. Monco and Mortimer originally embarked on their separate journey to track down El Indio. Along the way, they both encountered various challenges and faced a series of dangerous situations. For a few dollars more, cleverly interweaves their narratives, showcasing their contrasting styles and motivations. Monco, often seen as a silent and solitary figure, was driven purely by personal gain. He was a quick draw and relied on his close-range sharpshooting skills to eliminate his targets. Mortimer, on the other hand, was clearly fueled by a deep desire for revenge, never forgetting that it was El Indio who was responsible for the death of his sister, and this personal vendetta fueled his relentless pursuit of revenge. By the time their paths converged, they had both learned about El Indio's plan to rob the Bank of El Paso, which held a significant amount of money. Monco and Mortimer were really forced to form an uneasy alliance, each driven by their individual motivations. Their shared objective to bring down El Indio united them, despite their conflicting personalities. As the final showdown approached, the tension escalated, leading to a climactic duel in the town of Agua Caliente. The stakes were high, and there was no guarantee that any of them would be leaving that town alive. The odds were definitely in El Indio's favor. He had home field advantage, a deadly gang, and he himself was a skilled gunslinger. But then, at the end, something happened that evened the odds. After butting heads for such a long time, Monco and Mortimer saw each other in action and learned that their counterpart had skills that were assets in pursuit of their common goal. Both Monco and Mortimer were skilled marksmen, but they soon realized they had other qualities that could benefit them. Mortimer was a skilled strategist, probably a skill he developed when he was in the service. Thinking on a strategic level, he could move the pieces on the board to gain advantage. Monco, on the other hand, had skills in reading people's body language and gaining their trust. To be fair, both of them had the charisma of a stone statue, but together, and despite their bickering, they discovered they could get the upper hand if they combined their skills. Even working together, it almost wasn't enough to defeat El Indio. Monco and Mortimer methodically take out El Indio's gang, and after the dust settles from his gang being eliminated, the tables were turned once again. El Indio, through his treachery, got the drop on Mortimer. Now Mortimer was in a position more suited to Monco. Close range, close enough to read and rely on someone's body language. Mortimer, in this situation, was at the disadvantage. El Indio was poised to win. However, Monco, having become a student of Mortimer's lessons and strategy, was able to position himself in such a way that he was able to assist Mortimer in his final duel, making it a fair fight. When the music stopped, Mortimer was able to defeat El Indio in the duel. Mortimer, whose mission was now complete, left Monco the money, and rode off into the sunset. Throughout For a Few Dollars More, Sergio Leone's directorial style shines through. His deliberate pacing, wide-angle shots, intense close-ups heighten the dramatic tension. Ennio Morricone's iconic score, featuring unforgettable whistling melodies and the sound of twanging guitars, further enhances the film's atmosphere. I believe this film stands the test of time through its exploration of certain themes that are relevant today. And if you watch my last review, you're going to hear a lot of repeat because all three of these movies in the trilogy are fantastic for very similar reasons. Number one, the one we talked about earlier, revenge. The theme of revenge is prominent in this film. Mortimer, played by Lee Van Cleef, was driven by personal vendetta, that much is clear. He seeks to avenge past wrongs and was willing to go through great lengths, even considering going through the ultimate length to achieve his goal. He exists in a dark world in which there's only one goal, the murder of El Indio. Number two, justice and morality. The film examines the concepts of justice and morality in a lawless environment. This is a recurring theme in westerns, of course. Mortimer, as a former soldier, represents a dark version of justice and righteousness. He sought to bring criminals to justice within and outside the confines of the law. Monco also operated in a morally ambiguous space, often resorting to violence and manipulation to achieve his goals. When it comes to history, both men existed in a morally gray area for American culture. And the third theme that really stands out is greed and corruption. The central plot revolves around a bounty on the head of the notorious outlaw El Indio. Various characters, including bounty hunters and members of El Indio's gang, display their greed and willingness to do anything for money. We have to remember sometimes that money meant life in those times. Money meant food and shelter, and more importantly, protection. So in addition to dreams of wealth, money represented a means to a better, safer, and healthier lifestyle. These themes contribute to a greedy and morally ambiguous atmosphere that is characteristic of Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns, and really all filmmaking of a certain quality. In looking into the background of For a Few Dollars More, I found some fascinating information that was new to me. Well, some of it. First, Lee Van Cleef, who played Mortimer, was very grateful for his part in the movie, as he had fallen on hard times due to his heavy drinking. This movie effectively marked a resurgence in his career. Despite having a successful acting career for many years, it was Lee Van Cleef's first major role in a movie. He appeared in several famous movie westerns prior to this, but always played small roles. Sadly, Van Cleef had taken up painting in the interim as a way of making money to survive. Screenwriter Luciano Vincenzoni has claimed Sergio Leone rescued Lee Van Cleef's career by casting him as Mortimer. At that point, Van Cleef had not appeared in a movie since The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance in 1962. Leone, when he approached Van Cleef with this offer, agreed to pay him $1,000 a week for 9 weeks' work. The movie's massive success made Van Cleef a huge star in Europe. Vincenzoni reckons that Van Cleef made the equivalent of $10 million working on spaghetti westerns over the next 10 years. His counterpart, the man with no name, played by, of course, Clint Eastwood, calls himself Monco in the movie. For a man that's known as the man with no name, he seems to have a name in every one of these movies. But I digress. Monco is Spanish for lame of the one hand, or one-handed, or one-armed, which is pretty appropriate considering his habit of fighting, drinking, etc. with his left hand only. His right hand seems to always remain on his gun underneath his trademark poncho. So there's this assumption that Clint Eastwood's character in A Fistful of Dollars is the same as his roles in the two other movies in this trilogy, For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Well, I found out that almost wasn't the case, and it really depends on who you ask and what jurisdiction you're currently in. Writer and director Sergio Leone did not want to make a follow-up to A Fistful of Dollars in 1964. But it was such a huge hit that the production company, Jolly Films, refused to pay Leone what it owed him from that movie unless he made a follow-up to it. Leone was infuriated by Jolly Films and tried to make For a Few Dollars More while fighting the production company for back wages. He started making changes to the characters in the film to avoid any further financial dealings with Jolly Films. Leone even changed the name of the main character from Joe to Monco and claimed that Clint Eastwood's character was not the same in both films, even though they looked and acted identically and even wore the same clothes in both films. And when I say same clothes, I don't mean they looked the same, like they were the same. Jolly Films, of course, sued, claiming ownership of the Joe character, but lost when an Italian court found that the Western gunfighter's persona, characterized by that costume and mannerisms, belonged to the public domain's folklore. One little side note, the title of this movie reportedly originates out of Leone's spite towards Jolly Films for a few dollars more. Get it? So we all assume that Clint Eastwood's character is the same in all three movies, and thanks to the Italian judicial system, we can continue assuming that. I would argue, and I think we'd all agree, that Jolly Films had a case, that at least in the first two movies, those are really the same character. Clint Eastwood's gun in both movies is an 1873 Colt single-action Army revolver. It's either 44 caliber or 45 caliber, it's hard to say, but it's exactly the same gun that Eastwood's Joe used in A Fistful of Dollars in 1964. His entire costume, and let's focus on the poncho here, is not only the same in both movies, but they're actually the same items. Bullet holes from the finale of Fistful of Dollars were patched up for a few dollars more. This lawsuit between Sergio Leone and Jolly Films only adds to the mythos and debate about the Man with No Name Trilogy. I have found out there's a lot of questions and a lot of wild theories about the Man with No Name Trilogy, including things like the sequence in time that the movies take place, or who Clint Eastwood is actually portraying, and so on. I was right about some things I assumed, and I was wrong about a lot of others. I will cover all of those in my next and final installment of this trilogy's review. Estimated release date April 2027. What sets For a Few Dollars More apart from other films in this series is the focus is not really on Clint Eastwood this time, but more so on Lee Van Cleef. Colonel Douglas Mortimer's character in For a Few Dollars More is emblematic of the traditional Western hero, a seasoned, normally law-abiding citizen, driven to violence by personal vengeance. Lee Van Cleef's brilliant portrayal of Mortimer showcases his ability to embody both a fierce determination for justice and a calm, composed demeanor, creating a captivating and memorable character in the world of spaghetti westerns. And honestly, he's a much more interesting character in this movie than Monco, and I wish we could have seen more of him in action. This successful and unlikely partnership between Monco and Mortimer is a testament to the power of determination, loyalty, and teamwork in the face of overwhelming odds. The protagonist's ability to set aside their differences and come together for a common goal, and ultimately succeeding, speaks volumes about the potential of unlikely partnerships when everyone involved has something unique to bring to the table. If Monco and Colonel Mortimer can put aside their differences, control their lust for money, control their lust for revenge, then maybe we can learn a lesson from them. The film explores the complexities of human nature, highlighting those blurred lines between heroes and anti-heroes. In the end, For a Few Dollars More is a riveting western that showcases Sergio Leone's masterful storytelling and the unforgettable and unmatched performances of Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef. It is a tale of revenge, honor, and the pursuit of justice in a lawless land, leaving a lasting impact on the western genre and solidifying its place in cinematic history. Thanks for watching. Up next, the final installment. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.